Thank you for that introduction. I think everyone got a good view of what the Florence School of Regulation has to offer. We do a series of debates structured in different formats. Today, we are here at FSR Talks, which is a tri-party collaboration amongst the sister schools. We have the Florence School of Regulation in Italy, focused predominantly on the global north. And European affairs. We have the African School of Regulation, Carol representing there, which focuses more on the state of affairs in the African Union. And I represent FSR Global along with my colleague Parul, where we focus more on Global South and particularly with a predominant focus on Asia. So it's a very unique construct of three different schools coming together with Lucila, Carol, and I, trying to curate a set of topics that could be interesting both for the global north and the south in terms of discussion and debate. So today we have a particularly interesting topic. As we all have roots from our European school, we wanted to emphasize a bit on the role that the European Union has, particularly with regards to the energy transition pathways that we take, and what is the European Union's focus, particularly when it comes to global southern countries, and is there a sort of a different approach and strategy to different regions of the world, or what are the primary focuses that the Commission itself has, and how do we see the external action of Europe playing out in different parts of the world? So to discuss that, we will have Delphine, who is a senior program manager from the EU delegation to both India and Bhutan. She will focus on giving us this larger picture, but also focus a little bit more on what's happening closer to home for us, which is in India and Bhutan. And also not just that, look at other issues such as inclusivity, being in the aspect of gender, and how do we weave all of these things when we look at broad actions coming out from EU's external action. And following Delphine will be Salma from the JNU University in India, quite popular for all of you who know India. And she has been working in the Center of European Studies, so is, I would say, a professor in that, understanding really EU's interaction with different parts of the world, particularly here in India. So we will then look at her perspective on how to strengthen this collaboration that we have, and where do the opportunities lie, and where are the challenges currently, because the energy transition as a topic is in itself is not an easy one. So there are multiple perspectives and dimensions to address. So if two large economies and regions of the world do come together, how does that play out is what we will be able to understand from both. Then we will follow with Parul, Lucila, Carol, if she can, on certain questions that we would ask both Delphine and Salma. And of course, those of you in the audience, feel free. It is after all a very light-handed format of a talk. So it's okay for us to ask comfortable as well as uncomfortable questions. The whole idea is to bring out and flush out those things during our talk and see how we can collaborate more strongly going forward. So with that, I would like to invite Delphine to take the floor, where you will be giving us more with the EU hat, and then following you will be Salma. The floor is all yours, Delphine.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Because I seem to just have some network connectivity issues, so you can hear me well, right?
We can hear you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's glitching a little bit at my hand, so I'm hopeful that it will stay okay and stable. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I really not sure who is where, so a big hello from me to everyone. So as Shweta mentioned, I'm Delphine, and I'm working at the European Union delegation to India, also responsible for Bhutan. I have been in India only for a short time. I mean, I still consider myself quite young in this big country, only 3.5 years. But I must admit that I am a Southeast Asia baby. I've been in the region since the 20 years now. So it's definitely a geography that is close to my heart. So I didn't prepare a presentation. I really took it as a conversation. So I think I just wanted to illustrate a little bit, how we work here in India and Bhutan. So obviously, the climate and the environment, the issues around environmental degradation are quite an important areas of collaboration, because this is a crisis that we have to respond to. In Europe, we have the European Green Deal, which is our strategy, and the underlying strategy here for us in our collaboration with India and with the region is that if we want to achieve a green and sustainable and resilient future for us all, the international community needs to work together in a spirit of global solidarity. So, it will be no surprise to say, if I say to you that climate and the green transition are really at the heart of our EU-India strategic partnership. And definitely EU and India are committed partners. We focus on strategic topics such as renewable energy, sustainable urbanization, water management, disaster resilience, all these in line with the agenda for sustainable development. When it comes to the, the energy transition, of course, we have a dedicated framework and platform to engage. And this is the EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership. And this really help us to support India's in this clean energy transition and implementation of the Paris Agreement. The way we do it, I would say, is I'd like to highlight a two-pronged approach. On one hand, we have tools and instruments to help us strengthening our policy dialogue, and in particular, the exchange of information and best practices between the EU and India. And on another end, we are also, using our Team Europe partner also to foster greater investment in this green transition, because ultimately our resources for collaboration are quite limited. So we need to unlock finance to support the development of green and inclusive energy infrastructure in India and in the region. So on the soft component, we have specific tools dedicated to have dialogue and interaction with not only institutional stakeholders and policymakers, but also businesses, connect European and Indian businesses, and also engagement with financial institutions, think tanks, CSOs. And really the idea is to share information on EU's experience and European regulatory frameworks and standards, as well as policies. So notably, we have this dedicated technical assistance, which is led by PwC, which help us to have a dialogue and exchange with India across 6 key areas, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, smart grid and energy market, energy security, financing, and climate action. And as I said, we want this to be complemented by engagement with Team Europe actors, so mobilization of our private sector, but also financial institutions like AFD, KfW, with a view to unlock financing. And in that respect, I think it's worth for me to mention our global gateway strategy, which is relatively recent. This was launched less than 2 years ago. And really the objective of this strategy is to mobilize and increase investment, both public and private. And it really drives us to collaborate with EU member states and European financial institution working as Team Europe. And this is something that is quite important for us in India, because individually, we may not be able to do much, but when we put ourselves together, then we are able to offer quite an interesting, package and value proposition. And I have to say that this engagement with India in the clean energy, in this energy transition, is not new, really. I mean, started a while back already, and actually I was, I just say that I have been here only for 3.5 years, so I did pick the brain of some of my colleagues who are working with me and who have been the institutional memory for the EU here in India. And I must say that there are number of things that we feel we've had success with. I have to here mention, for example, the offshore wind. The whole story started back in 2010, 2011, and we were at that time, we had agreed to collaborate with the government of India to support pilot on offshore wind. And it took about 10 years and supporting coastal surveys in Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, some assessment of potential, some study tour and technical exchange to help India come up with a roadmap for offshore wind. But here we are today, when the government of India is inviting tenders for the first offshore wind plan. So this is this is like a tangible sort of outcome we see from this early on engagement and this sharing of experience and technical know-how. Moving forward, definitely we will continue support the policy dialogue and exchange of lessons and practices. And on the other hand, we will continue mobilizing important financing for supporting new green energy infrastructure, and also, I think, importantly, let's not forget energy efficiency. I mean, green hydrogen is going to be an important area of focus. What shape and form this support will take is yet to be seen, but I mean, we know that the government of India is creating hydrogen valleys, and we are likely to support this by doing supporting preliminary studies and and focusing on the hard to abate sector like fertilizers, cement, steel, to see how to decarbonize this sector using green hydrogen, for example. And again here, policy exchanges between EU and India, as we have the hydrogen bank policy in the EU, and I understand that India is also looking at becoming the South Asia hydrogen bank. So I mean, how this support will materialize, I mean, is yet to be accurately defined, but in a nutshell, we aim to support India to build their ecosystem in that field. And then once you have that ecosystem in place, there will hopefully be a meaningful way for India to use this technology to meet its own NDC's target and long-term climate action, but also identify further opportunities for collaboration in that space. this, I just mentioned that, India was also looking at positioning itself in the hydrogen space. And this, leads me to highlight that, of course, India, holds a very special position in the South Asia region, particularly economically, of course. And we know that there are important energy efficiency gains to be made at the regional level, and also great opportunities for unlocking vast renewable energy potential from neighboring countries. If electricity can be freely traded between countries geographically located relatively close to each other. With that in mind, we see an opportunity clearly to support cross-border electricity trade in the BBIN region, the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal region, whereby massive hydroelectricity could be traded with India and Bangladesh from Nepal and Bhutan, while important solar and wind power could be brought in as well to address electricity deficit in these countries in the winter months. So this is definitely an area of focus for us in the coming 5 years. We believe that we have the experience of 27 EU member states putting their electricity network and markets in common. And so, support to regional electricity interconnection would complement very well what we do at bilateral level in the energy sector in the targeted countries. As I mentioned, the sharing of experience is something that we want to bring in, and we see clearly an added value for us to come in that space. Although we understand very much that there are other actors who have been investing resources in that sector for a while now, US.
We have a small technical snag with Delphine. Let's just give her 10 seconds if she's able to patch back in. This is also a reality of connectivity that we have to deal with in the global south. I think colleagues from Africa will also relate, particularly when we are scheduling things with South Africa. We have to keep in mind the load shedding schedule to be able to. So this goes to show how much work we have to do in just providing reliable access to energy. So a lot of work cut out for most of us. But while Delphine comes back, probably Salma, I'll invite you to complement or challenge some of the things Delphine has already presented, and then we'll circle back to her after you so that we can pick up on some of the really interesting things she spoke about. I think for me, it was Team Europe coming together, the global gateway, a much needed effort, but will it suffice the kind of volumes of capital that needs to be raised? There's, of course, technology support coming in from EU at a EU level, as well as member states bilaterally as well. But where are we in terms of reality today, and how much harder should we work is, I think, the perspective we'll get more from you. So off to you.
Thank you, Shweta, and thank you so much for having me here for the FSR talks. I have a long history of engagement with European issues, and while my primary focus is on foreign and security policy, let me say that as we move to the next slide, I think two important points, first of all, and that is, energy and climate change have become important foreign policy issues. It's no longer as if foreign policy today is in a very different, rarefied environment, and climate belongs to experts. I think it has become part of mainstream foreign policy. And I think that situates a big shift in the way policy making is done, and how you interact with partners is a big shift I see in foreign policy. And having said that, when we talk about energy transition and what needs to be done, what is being done, I think it's, let me just first say at the outset, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress with shifting timelines. And I'm going to take the points which Delphine had said, but work a little bit with the slides I had sent, just to situate what are we looking at, and then specifically the India-EU component. I think, first of all, when we're looking at the energy transition issue, I think clearly we are divided into the global north and the global south, and we have a very clear divided world on it. Despite meeting on multilateral platforms and agenda setting, which talks about commitments, reaching a net zero, we are looking at a very unequal terrain in terms of setting global standards and coming to national commitments and the kind of tools that states have in order to meet this. And so the two important points which stand out in any conversation on energy transition anywhere is that, first of all, these interactions show that it is extremely uneven. And second, I think we need a very new frame to engage in energy transition. You can't just do it as, how do I reach a target? But I think it has to be integrated into a larger frame. Why do we need that? I think we'll go to the next slide over here. From a global south perspective, I think if you look at what are the challenges which are there for energy transition, and I think that's extremely important to address, located where we are. First is that, it's like a honeycomb kind of an idea over here. That means these are all interconnected, and that just brings to bear the kind of challenges we're looking at when we talk about this. I mean, energy integral to the very life and soul of any society or a state. But we're looking at levels of very unequal social development. We've got very different economic levels in the global south. We have an issue of infrastructure. Then we have a capacity issue. And more importantly, anything which needs a transformation of the scale and size we're talking in terms of energy transition is a resource issue. And in this context, we are up against a huge mountain in terms of even making a transition, because our primary frameworks in which all the economies are still located is a fossil fuel economy. And even as we talk of the first generation shift and the second generation shift, it's not simply a case of, taking an industry and the current energy that it is drawing upon and just simply moving or diversifying your energy basket. Because, like I said, if you take, all these 5 points, they create a tremendous challenge in the way any country in the global south will be able to do that. India may be in a better off position along with China and Brazil as some of what we would look at the BRICS countries. But I think that also tells you that it's a very differentiated story within. So one should not fall prey to the kind of statistics we see and say, okay, there is an upward movement, electrification has taken place in 50% of the population. You still got a huge area in which the ability to move any one of them means we are looking at a very different frame of work that is required. And that's where I think I'll quickly move to slide 3, where I think I'm trying to offer you a different way in terms of how do we look at it in terms of energy transition and what would be a broad policy recommendation. And when I was thinking about this, and something which I've been engaging with in the last few days was to look at the SDGs, not only in terms of what it means for the shift globally to meet our SDG goals by 2030. But I mean, I was just last week in a panel we were looking at inclusion and SDG 10. I was on a panel on SDG 10 on education. And it just kind of at that point, thinking of what I would say here, made me realize that why is it we are not integrating something which is fundamentally in a collective sense being articulated and put out over there? And why is it we are approaching in many of these issues in a sectoral way, right? We're just coming at it from saying that, okay, this energy would be fundamental as SDG 7 to reach our SDG goals by 2030. I mean, in more ways than one, right? I mean, clean and sustainable energy by itself is a fundamental goal in itself. But so much of the SDG 17s requires that societies be in that space where they can reach the other targets. And that makes it I think, a good point for us to discuss and probably find ways to look at it. 4 things stand out to me over here in terms of now the more technical dimension of it, of how we are looking at the energy transition. I'm not getting into the political policy part of it, which is a separate track altogether. First of all, I think a lot of it would require, and let me start by the quadrant on the side, innovative solutions. I think innovation is going to be a key when we think of energy transitions. There is still a lot of talk of the big projects which needs to be done. And I think that itself, when you think of it and connect it to the other quadrant, which is better financing, immediately draws attention. The minute you think big and global, your first challenge is financing. And if you start going, innovative, low cost, low tech, I think it opens up pathways in which you can look at, how you can, provide to the user from a user-friendly perspective, from a user end use, from a way in which we reduce our carbon imprint by looking at innovative solutions. So that requires a very different kind of thinking altogether. A critical component of that is that you won't be able to move forward with better financing, and that is both public and private. And that's where the EU has also come in, and some of the other countries come in. And financing would link up also in the sense for countries in the global south. And if I put India as an example over there, then we've got a whole network of bilateral and multilateral partnerships. We've also got your multilateral development banks and financial institutions providing different kinds of funding lines and credit lines which are available. The point is, how are we, as say India in this case, leveraging some of this, or how are we reimagining some of these bilateral and multilateral partnerships in the context of energy transition, but also in terms of your larger, global governance, targets? Because after all, a Paris Agreement is not a standalone. It's part of, what has also come out of the G20, 1 year, which India has led, and the slogan we offer to the world of the one world, one earth. I mean, that is a reality. There is this only one chance we have. But are we leveraging multilateral and bilateral partnerships? I think that looks. And I think a fourth component of on a technical side over here would be, how do you reimagine production in a very different way, right? I think, for example, one of the things which is happening today is, you're looking at 2 important things which will happen in the context of the energy transition. And that is, as we shift into a large-scale urbanization, which is also a part of growth agenda, you will also be challenged with mobility issues, right? So how are you going to redesign mobility in cities in a different fashion altogether? And here the EU's work has been phenomenal, in terms of what the EIB has been doing in terms of funding the metro projects. I think that is extremely important. In fact, we have been the largest recipients in India in terms of transport financing. And that really goes to the heart of the issue that energy transition has to be also linked up to people's lifestyle choices, right? So one of the big talk is like you can move from the ICE, or the internal combustion engine in the cars, and you can move to an EV. But is anybody talking about, where that component of energy which everybody's plugging into is how much of it is green? I mean, nobody's talking about the energy you're drawing to charge your battery. Nobody's talking about, for example, I've not seen anything. What happens 10 years from now to those lithium batteries when we'll have a mountain of those lithium batteries? What are we going to do with that? I mean, are we putting a problem of one solution today of a low carbon to a problem tomorrow where the next generation will deal with that, right? I mean, why are we not looking at how changing patterns of urbanization requires from the very beginning a different design of mobility, right? Instead of this individual mobile thing, we have to be looking at a mass transport system, but that which connects the last mile. Often the reason people don't get onto a mobile, mass rapid is because the last mile connectivity is not there, and that design part of it is really missing. So I think one requires a total redesigning of how we look at what it means. And then, of course, you will have to get into specifics about where does energy transition fit into each country's own development agenda. And for a country like India, if you take even the current political framework, okay, we have been 75 years, we're looking at the next 25 years. How do we scale up to the size in terms of the challenge which is there ahead of us? You're going to have Industry 4.0 happening. We're still looking at a fundamental point where the first revolution of even illiteracy is still existing with us, and we've got aspirations for all of this. So I think it requires a very innovative way of thinking over here. And one of the important, led issues is when we look at solutions, is to look at how do we engage the local and the community into it. I think that is extremely important. And more importantly, I think you have to start making energy as that touchword which becomes part of everyday vocabulary. It cannot be just limited to experts and all, because we all are the consumers. We all are contributing in some ways either to that carbon footprint or to reducing the carbon footprint, right? So how do we become conscious of how we do it at an individual level, while at the same time we look at what the policy world and the experts interface and bring. But more importantly, in my mind, I thought, like, why is it that we are not framing some of these discussions within the Sustainable Development Goals? So let me just kind of stop with these first few remarks and then come back on further discussion.
Thank you, Salma. It was a quite comprehensive view, and I agree with a lot of your points that you raised. I was on a panel last week as well, and the tougher questions asked was the role of democracies in speeding up the energy transition process. A very heavy title, but I completely second innovative solutions. There's so many things we can already learn from other sectors. Finance and telecom is a great example. Energy need not reinvent the wheel. But I think the simplest answer as to why it's not working is we still have a very siloed governance and management structures that does not allow for the left hand to talk to the right hand. And that is where the roles of the likes of you and us and Delphine is more pronounced, where we step out and say, pull back people and connect those dots and push them back. And I think Delphine's example of the Team Europe approach to going about that is a good start, but bottom up, I think at a country level, we need to start looking at energy as a whole, as opposed to it just as a sector. Completely agree with you there. So Delphine, since you got cut while you were making your remarks.
Quite ironical talk on energy, and I got out of power, So
yes.
I had to struggle getting back online. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, so that's what I was mentioning. When you stepped out, we have a lot more work to do in terms of reliability of power. It's an index in itself for those of us in the audience. But maybe first quick reactions from you to what Professor Salma said, and if you had to make some more remarks because you got cut out, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got this in the middle, of course. Apology to Salma for that, but I mean, from the slides and the few points that she was making, I think, I mean, we are sort of saying pretty much the same thing, right? In terms of bringing innovative solution, engaging bilateral, multilateral level. I mean, so I think we are on similar page here. I mean, what I was almost at the end of what I wanted to share with you as preliminary thoughts, but I mean, I think collaboration is, for us, is essential. I mean, going solo will get us nowhere. We need to work together, that's for sure. The underlining principle is also that, I mean, as the EU, we're not there to preach. We're there to share our experience, and it's really a partnership kind of spirit that is being followed here. We need to keep the conversation going to see tangible changes. These are changes that require time, and investments are not done from one day to another, right? These are heavy investments. and mobilizing finance takes time. But we feel that by sharing lessons and technical expertise, know-how that we have used at our hand, we can maybe help accelerate the pace. And by bringing our Team Europe partner and bringing some innovative financing instruments, because I think that's something that Salma highlighted as well. The innovative financing. We are mobilizing blended finance guarantees. We are combining EU grant with loan from financial institutions. So we're trying to put in place and deploy tools that help this investment decision. But of course, I mean, the policymakers, the regulators are also key and essential to make the institutional framework and ecosystem align with the vision and the path that is followed.
Thanks, Delphine. So tying into what you were just saying and also what Salma just presented, we have figured by now that, of course, the transition is a complex machine that we need to move. But one of the key ingredients to make that happen is the finance. At least, like, say, I can comment for countries like India, the least estimated budget that's required to fuel the transition is somewhere around 160 billion per year, a billion USD. And anywhere the top figure that we have is close to 600 billion per year in terms of the US dollars that needs to flow in. Definitely the kind of capital that is being raised or fed into the country right now is just a blip in that bucket. So, and if countries like India, which has high population centers and is sort of concentrated in terms of the collective emissions, not per capita, that would be an unfair one. Still, we have an important role to play. So if we do not get this kind of money being mobilized, are we really going to come out of the climate goals that we have in a winning situation, or are we going to collectively falter? Because that's a big ask, and it's the same question many other southern global south countries have. So then in that case, our big multilateral platforms and governments looking to raise that kind of money to invest into the global south is the question more towards Delphine. And then Salma, for you, is you talked about a new framework for approach, particularly in terms of finance. Do you then see the platforms and the likes of the UNFCCC going beyond just acting as a framework to collaborate and form these commitments, but also become that platform that can help disperse this kind of money? Because the budgets of the highest development banks also don't run beyond a single or the maximum double-digit $1 billion. So we are looking at least a 3 to 4 figure $1 billion per year that's needed to fuel the transition. So either of you are free to take the floor first.
Okay, I can come in, and then Salma, you can continue. I mean, on our side, I mean, I see definitely. So we work on a 7 years budgetary cycle, right? So now we are in our 2021-2027 cycle, and from what I can see or feel is that definitely in the current financial cycle, there is a deliberate intention to accelerate the mobilization of private finance, because even for us at the EU, I mean, there are budgetary constraints, right? But we know that there is enormous amount of finance that is stuck in pension fund and insurance funds and so on. So really, what I think one of the shift I can see from the previous years was really coming up with some instruments to help unlock this private finance. And this is something that, I mean, it is hard for me to give a tangible example today, because these are instruments that takes a bit of time to be sort of, put in place. But what we call guarantee instrument is something that, we've launched now. I think Brussels launched back in 2021. So we have selected a guarantee instrument at corporate level that would help us mobilize private sector finance across 6 thematic areas. Energy, of course, the green energy transition, the digital transformation, the sustainable urbanization. So all these instruments. So this where the EU sort of like, brings in a small amount of money to de-risk an investment and to attract private sector to put in money, so that you sort of reduce the perceived risk that is there to invest in a country like India or Bangladesh or Nepal or Bhutan, for that matter. So, I mean, I'm very excited about this instrument, even though it's not yet, something that I, can have a clear example at hand, because, as I said, it's taking a while to put this in place. But we know that our European financial institution partner, they are ready, and they have, they have investment in the pipeline, and they just need this guarantee instrument to help deploy further financing. I mean, I do have an example at hand in the agri sector. We have the Spanish cooperation that is also collaborating with the EU to help invest in India, but not only in India, in Latin America as well, in Africa. And the idea there is to support the work of innovative agri-tech or innovative company, fintech, to bring more finance to the ground, more finance to smallholders, so that they produce better with less inputs, more efficiently, better, better suited to a changing climate. So these are the kind of, innovative approach that we want to support. And for that, a small amount of EU financing has allowed, a much bigger pot of finance from the private sector. And this is clearly something we are keen on seeing more and more across the world, and here in this region where there is enormous potential for innovation to flourish and for growth.
Thank you, Delphine. I think the de-risking money is very important because only then the large capital flows will happen. But Salma, for you to react.
Yeah, Shweta, on that question, I think that 3 important components we are looking at. One is, there's the agenda setting at the international level, which is not only a political framing, but it's also about how do we collectively move forward in terms of global governance, because this is something which affects everybody. But when it comes to the issue of financing, you're immediately met with a reality of 2 sides. One, what is the kind of commitment which the global North wants to take in terms of, even if there is this historical issue, and the challenge of the global South, that development is crucial to their very existence, right? I mean, we are talking, and in all of that, of course, technology will produce better ways of production as well, but also will create other kinds of challenges. So in terms of the kind of finance we are talking about and frameworks, I think, the COP last year, also identified that they would have to come up with a better way of getting climate finance organized, because it cannot just happen to, put a target over there and expect that states will automatically be in a position to do it. And that hand-holding will have to be extremely diverse. That hand-holding will have to be also not only in terms of the investment side of it, but would also require some amount of a technology element to it, in which technology is made accessible. It's not just always we are thinking in terms of the investment part of it. The sad part is that technology obviously does not belong to any state. I mean, we all know that most of the technology is in the private sector, which means nobody's going to, in the right senses, think of transferring a technology just for nothing, right? So how do you make it work is I think, extremely important. In terms of a collective agenda setting, and if one can, look at last year's G20, then I think that in terms of the backdrop of the COVID, the emphasis on the single supply chain, and where after the 2008 crisis, the G20 as the hub of putting economics back, climate figured on it in a very critical way, because the economy is intertwined with climate change, with the kind of energy, consumption patterns which are there across states. And so, it's the lifeline. And if that lifeline itself is of energy is going to be compromised in terms of what it does, not only to your economy, but to the quality of life of your people, I think that part, that element has become an integral part of the G20 now, I think. But having said that, I think the biggest challenge is how do you get the money to come in? And probably, this will again vary. And I think this is where partnerships, and Delphine also emphasized, India and EU, we are in that good framework where our strategic partnership since 2004 has expanded to, now have clean energy and a climate partnership as an important part of it. But I think that is also, one looks at what is happening within the country. I mean, there is that political recognition on, how you need to bring this convergence to make it happen. At the same time, the hesitance in terms of private capital to come in would have to look at innovative ways of how do you incentivize, right? How do you give them some kind of incentives in terms of business or others, which allows them to then come in. In some ways, some of these experiments may or may not work. And so there has to be some kind of even a protection mechanism if private capital is going to come in to try out some of these things. And perhaps one of the things is thinking of innovative collaboration, where probably, either within the framework of the India EU, or maybe even any of the other agencies, there is some kind of underwriting of like a cost in case some of, so probably thinking of collaboration innovatively, incentivizing it, and also, encouraging various models in which we can go from small to big. I think it's extremely important to try small pilot ones to see how they produce an impact at the ground level. If you could get, technically speaking, a village could go off the grid. If a village is not on the grid, it doesn't have to get on the grid, because that's the way we are thinking. Can't you have an off-the-grid solution by looking at renewables as a way in which to design if this village is getting upgraded, or if a city's capacity augmentation in the use of energy is taking place? I think that requires a different. If you think that the only way a city can be connected is via the grid, then you're not thinking creatively. And if you get off the grid, you would then come up with, okay, you could have solar voltaic ways of doing it, right? And India and France are leading on the International Solar Alliance. You can come up with very creative ways of doing things. You could make that whole, unit or that village self-sustainable in that sense. But it requires the ability to think beyond where we are tied to think that the grid is the only lifeline. And I think it requires all of us as also people who work in these areas to be able to push our limits of understanding of how we can redesign, not only what we can do, but even the finance part, which is extremely crucial.
Thank you, Salma, for challenging on the innovation front. I do know my colleagues from the African School of Regulation are striving to do this in Africa. They have a wonderful tool that helps optimize those very choices, the grid versus the off-grid, and how do you allocate the very limited finance in ensuring you're able to give the maximum reliable access to energy in countries that are just trying to electrify. And uh, it's a different challenge in countries like India, but Africa is already doing some parts of this right. I'll now invite Parul to ask the questions to our two speakers.
Sure. Thanks, Shraddha. So at the outset, thank you, Delphine and Professor Bawa, for the insightful comments both of you have made so far. I think what I'll try to do is touch upon some of the perspectives which I feel we haven't yet looked at so far. So Delphine, I have two questions for you. One is actually from the introduction that you were giving, wherein you said you've spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and that just made me wonder, from an EU perspective, has there been any pertinent challenge that you feel while working in the global South? Of course, in regard to energy transition, if you can, or in general as well, we can touch upon that. And my second question actually stems from the fact that of late I heard, EU coming up with a lot of women initiatives, women-led initiatives for women in energy, and we happen to be an all-women panel today. So just wondering if you is looking at doing something in the same regard for global South. I know you're specifically looking at India and Bhutan right now, so maybe if you can highlight any of those aspects. And Professor Bawa, I think you mentioned a very, very important point, which is the overlapping of different SDGs and how we cannot look at a specific SDG in isolation. So that got me thinking of you belong to one of the premier institutions of India, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and that makes me think about what the role of academic institutions is when we're looking at engagement between what we are doing today, which is EU and global South and energy transition. So is there, I mean, we talk about the role of young people in general, but if I know that JNU has existing MOUs and interactions with various European universities, so just if we can bring that into perspective. Thank you.
Maybe just before the speakers react, probably can I ask Lucilla also to pose her question so that you can integrate your responses given the time constraint. I think we'll have a 5-minute extension because we had a technical snag in the beginning, but I think we have a good few minutes.
Thank you, Sweta. Thank you, Peru. Thank you, Delphine, and thank you, Baba, for your comment. And actually, we tended to give a space for our invited speakers and the hosts actually will leave us to speak and ask questions in the end. But I actually have just a small point in terms. I think we have a global audience. We have the audience that is interested in a broad view of the EU external policy, which is pretty much about the document that Delphine had mentioned on EU external energy engagement in changing of the world, which has many aspects, has finance aspects that has been posted here, but has as well the aspect of critical raw material, which I think many of the audience are so interested in listening a bit because it has been coming up, especially as EU is about to approve the Critical Raw Material Act, that EU has signed agreements with Chile, for instance, on critical raw material. And perhaps it would be interesting to listen from Delphine what is the EU strategy and in EU view and with relations of agreements of trading on critical raw materials with South Asia, India in particular, which is your field. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Lucilla. So we have 3 broad questions: gender, role of academia, and of course, within trade, critical minerals is South Asia also a focal point of interest for EU with regards to that. Probably, Delphine, you want to quickly take first to respond?
Okay, Parul, you ask challenges. I think different country, different challenges, right? It's very hard to say to give a common answer there. I think in Thailand, my biggest challenge was, staff turnover in the administration, because every year I had to re-explain the same thing again and again. So, there was no continuity in the way we were engaging with the government partner on certain issues. So that was definitely a challenge. In Myanmar, I think the biggest challenge for us was, awareness and capacity building, because we were, the country was coming out of so many years of isolation and, autocratic rule that, the opening was a formidable window of opportunity. But at the same time, we had to really start from a very, very low, level. So, I mean, as I said, different country, different challenge, but everything is always, very exciting. And, if there was no challenges, we would not be doing what we are doing. So, in a way, I take it as more as opportunities than anything else. On gender, thank you for asking the question. Really, I mean, gender equality and women empowerment is really a key policy of the European Union. And I mean, we renewed our commitment to gender equality and women empowerment back in 2020. And then, so we released the Gender Action Plan at the end of 2020. And one key thematic areas is for us is to, seize the opportunity or harness the opportunities offered by the green transition and the digital transformation. So clearly, I mean, there's a very strong, appetite to dwell in that space. I mean, we are just. Today is 20th of March, 8th of March, we celebrated International Women's Day. So there was a plethora of articles in the press. And I mean, the figures are, abysmal when it comes to women participation, not only in the, decision-making process, clearly, but also in the employment workforce and so on. So clearly we see there an opportunity. Now, the question is how to go about it, how to engage strategically on this topic. This is for us very critical. So we hope to come up with a little bit more. What I want to say is that at the moment, I mean, our approach is mainstreaming. So whatever we do, we make sure that there is a component and some element pertaining to gender equality and women empowerment, whether it's an investment program that we are supporting with a financial institution, whether it's a technical assistance program that we are putting forward. But what I really would like us is to be a bit more strategic and a bit more, a bit more, innovative in the way of tackling the issue. So this is very much work in progress. I think it's the UN Secretary General that has said that, gender is the unfinished business. I mean, and don't quote me on this one, but there was something along this line, right? So, I mean, it's really, we are really at the starting point, I think, of this big agenda. And the issue is very complex because gender intersects with so many other parameters, whether it's economic status, religion, gender norms, stereotypes. And so it's not only a technical issue to resolve, but something a bit more subtle than this to be addressed. So we hope, I'm glad you said that Europe is coming up with more and more initiative, and I honestly, I hope that we will be able to do more in the coming years. Something certainly that is I mean, we are clearly looking at seriously.
Thank you, Delphine, for that response. Salma, you have the last 2 minutes. So you'll have the last word to wrap up the discussion. So I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Lucilla was talking about, these critical raw material. I think it's an extremely political issue when you think of what we are looking in terms of the lithium batteries. and the countries which have the resources and who has command over the supply chain. So the three countries in terms of Chile and DRC and Australia, where the material is available, and China kind of commanding the supply chain. And so there's the entire politics of it, which would need to be addressed in terms of what does it mean where, critical raw materials have been bought up or ensured, and how do we navigate that politics? I think that requires a different discussion altogether. But everybody's basically tying into that same supply chain. And what does it mean? There is no de-risking which is going to happen. So we are moving from looking at green transition, and we are still, tied up at a very political high risk in terms of that. I just wanted to flag that. Thank you, Parul, for that question. I think, what is a key to taking some of what we are doing over here in very different spheres is collaboration. Delphine is there at the delegation. I have a very long association. I'd really pitch for having a special call to look at think tank university collaboration on energy transitions. And if we could design a project on that, it would be fantastic if we can have a multi-year project which can come through. There's wonderful work, Shweta and Parul, what you're doing at FSR in terms of the regulatory. We have the research thing, but if you can bring this and put out a little bit more concerted effort, that would be one thing. We could also look at collaboration between our own institutions as well. And probably, this year it's already over, but next year we could think of really, since I have a Jean Monnet chair at the university, I can tell you, and Delphine is also probably aware of those things, we could create a network and apply for network funding. That would be a huge way of, taking the resource we have, but we could create a multiplier effect in the sense of connecting different knowledge sources and bases. It could be a large one, since you have an Africa outreach as well, it would allow us to bring Africa, where again, the problem is also very acute. But these are two things which come to my mind where we could really look at collaboration as a way forward. And since Delphine is on board, and I will personally put in a request to the delegation here. The next time I meet Hervé, I'm going to tell the ambassador, I said, okay, the next think tank project, probably not on just India EU think tank, but can we get into energy and make that as the core? Because at this point, there have been 2 rounds of these think tank initiatives, which I have been part of, and they are catch-all. Right. And I would say that let's get a little bit more focus, on that. That would be one way of pitching some of these things and taking it forward. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Salma. On that positive note, I think the work for us is SDG 17 via 17 to 7. So Delphine, count on Salma and I to partner and come to you with a request. We'll be there. Thank you for the experts for throwing light on such a multidimensional issue and to bring in both the global north and southern perspective. Also, thanks to our discussants and co-hosts for challenging them with those questions, and to our lovely participants for staying those few extra minutes with us. Of course, the recording of this is also be available on YouTube just after. So thank you for joining us, and see you at our next FSR Talks on yet another topic from around the world. Have a lovely evening and good afternoon. Bye-bye.